Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. It will come as a surprise to absolutely no one if I was to reveal that Nicola Sturgeon tells lies. All the time. Every time that woman opens her mouth, lies and untruths come pouring out like tea from an urn. She can't help herself, of course. She's just a natural liar. Because the one thing that tiny little woman cannot afford to do is to tell the truth. Because the truth, for Nicola Sturgeon, is so appallingly damaging. Because all this veneer of her wonderfulness would come crashing down once people knew the actual truth. Now, this particular video is all about a set of lies that she's maintained for quite some time now about how much she's done for climate change and how much she's changed Scotland so that the world is a better place. Well, Nick, I'll tell you now, you could shut up shop tomorrow and Scotland could issue not one more molecule of pollution and it would make zero difference to the world. You just can't help but lie, though, because you want to stand bestride the stage, walking the world like a titan. Oh, look at me, look at me. I am doing all this. I have done things that no one else can do. No, Nicola, you've done precisely nothing. You have made claims that Scotland is so powerful in wind energy, which are quite unsubstantiated, and in fact are, of course, lies. And you talk about you've reduced this and you've reduced that. I mean, precisely nothing is what you've done. You have done nothing. And you're so unimportant, you weren't even invited to COP27 and simply had to tag along so that you could get photographs with, I don't know, bar staff, waiting staff, drivers. Oh, look, I'm standing here next to the chauffeur for the President of Moldova. Because that's the level you're at. You're nobody. But in your mind, your ego will not allow you to realise that you're just a town mayor. And so you have to make these claims, these grandiose claims. All you're doing is highlighting your intellectual poverty. Because you think everybody in Scotland is stupid enough to listen to what you say and to believe it. I mean, yes, there are some stupid people. That can't be helped. But most people know that what spews forth from your gob is nothing but a stream of absolute bullshit. And we're going to take a look at that right now. So here we are. Nicola Sturgeon's claims to be a world leader on climate change are in tatters after a watchdog report. Not that this will surprise anyone, of course. We all know that she's been claiming a lot of this, and it is all utter rubbish. But that doesn't fit with the agenda and the narrative that the tiny woman wants to portray. She wants to be 10 foot taller than she actually is. She wants to be this towering genius that can solve the world's problems. And all she is a useless gobshite who's full of it, basically. But anyway, let's get in. This is from The Telegraph. Nicola Sturgeon's claims to be a world leader on tackling climate change is in tatters after the UK's independent watchdog found her government is missing most of its green targets and has no clear delivery plan for how they can be achieved. Now, that's not the message that Sturgeon is sending out, of course. Sturgeon's sending out the message that they've achieved so much and this has changed and that's reduced and look at our clear plan that we are doing this. There is no clear plan. They have no idea what they're doing. But that should come as a shock to nobody. The First Minuscule repeatedly boast about her government's world-leading climate change targets. Well, your targets can be world-leading, but they're completely unachievable. Anyway, she did this at the COP26 and 27 climate change summits, urging global leaders to match their rhetoric with reality. Well, urging the drivers and the aides of world leaders. She never got anywhere near world leaders. The nearest she got was that she was, staying at the hotel down the road. But independent advisors, the Climate Change Committee, the CCC, said Miss Sturgeon's government has missed 7 of the 11 targets, with progress having largely stalled in recent years and no coherent explanation being offered by ministers. It's simple, really. She has these targets because if I say these things, I sound good. it'll get reported and people will think I'm a capable and adequate human being. My God, she has delusions of adequacy. But, of course, she's only announcing things. She's not actually doing things. She's not putting money into them. Because she has only, she's got her obsessions with anti-English rhetoric, her obsessions with pulling Scotland out of the United Kingdom where it has a voice and throwing it into the EU where it'll have no voice, her obsessions with ensuring that men can have access to women's safe spaces. These are the things that are important to Nicola, not climate change, not the economy, not education, not public safety, nothing. No, single-minded obsessions with things that affect Nicola Sturgeon that she thinks are important, not which actually are important. Anyway, in a deeply embarrassing conclusion for the SNP and the Scottish Green Coalition, honestly, it is like the axis of evil up there, the detailed assessment warned their government's trend of failure. I'll just check this out. Oh, I think they're relating only to green matters, but of course trend of failure basically sums up everything the SNP have ever attempted. This will continue without urgent and strong action. And of course, Sturgeon and the SNP are incapable of offering either. In particular, it found glaring gaps in the coalition's plan to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030, which is impossible. A target it predicted would be missed by a wide margin. Missed by wide margin, planetary wide. It will not ever be hit. It is impossible to hit. This stupid thing that she said, we're going to do this 75% reduction. Effectively, what you need to do is shut down every industry in Scotland. Every industry. And farming. And get rid of all farmers. That's the only way you can achieve it, is for everyone in Scotland to just sit at home, not put the heating on. God, no, you can't put the heating on. No food. Don't flush the toilets. This is where you're going with this. But it sounded good when she was delivering it at a conference, because bullshit. While emissions fell in 2020, the committee said this was largely due to travel restrictions during the COVID-19 pandemic and forecast they would rebound when the following year's figures are calculated. Well, go figure. Scotland's previous lead over the rest of the UK in cutting emissions has evaporated, it was warned, and plans to decarbonise transport are falling behind other parts of the country, with sales of electric cars much higher in England. Scotland can't have electric cars. The trouble with Scotland is you've got basically three big cities: Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen. They're the big three. Everyone else in Scotland tends to live in smaller communities. I mean, things like Dundee, but it's not massive. You've got these places, Inverness, as I mentioned, but it's not massive. Most of Scotland, and when you look on a map, you can see this. Most of Scotland is very small, rural, few and far between. You need cars, and you need reliable cars, and especially in the winter, because in the winter when there's not much sunshine and it's very cold, electric cars in the cold are not very good, and you do not want to be stuck out in the Highlands of Scotland in an electric car with limited energy, limited electricity, because you're going to be needing that to keep warm. Heat from an internal combustion engine is a waste product, and if you're stuck out there, at least you can keep warm from a full tank, and a full tank will last a lot longer than a full battery. So people of Scotland quite rightly reject electric cars because they're not stupid. Anyway, Scotland's consumption emissions, the amount associated with public spending on goods and services, were found to be 22% higher than the UK average in 2018. Well, of course, one of the things that you've got in Scotland is it's very cold in the winter, so you're going to burn through a lot more electricity and gas. There's, as I say, the distances between places are higher, so you're going to be, the transport costs are higher. This is the problem they've got. Scotland's geography is working against it for this. But that is reality, and reality has no bearing on the SNP or Nicola Sturgeon. Similarly, the 230-page assessment said it was not clear how ministers' plan to cut agriculture emissions would be met, and warned that targets for restoring peatland carbon stores were being missed by more than half. There is another video I will be doing on the cutting of agriculture, and do not ever think that that is any way to do with the climate or the ecology. The cutting of food supply is purely political, but that's another video. So the committee said closer cooperation with the UK government was required in some areas. That is never going to happen. Not while Sturgeon is in charge, because the one thing she cannot have is closer ties to Westminster. She's trying to pull everything apart. She would rather Scotland burnt and everyone in it starved and unemployed than do a day's work with Westminster because of her single-minded, sickening obsession. The CCC is an independent statutory body that advises the UK government and devolved administrations on their emission targets, and it is chaired by Lord Deben, who, as John Gummer, was Environment Secretary in John Major's government. He said in 2019 the Scottish Parliament committed the country to some of the most stretching climate goals in the world, and they are increasingly at risk without real progress towards those milestones that Scottish ministers have previously laid out. Basically, they're living in cloud cuckoo land. There is no way that they can achieve what they said they were going to achieve. They said these things because it sounded good. They wanted to appear powerful and marvellous and wonderful, and look at us. What they've asked for is, by any stretch of the imagination, impossible. 1 year ago, he continues, Lord Deben, 1 year ago, I called for more clarity and transparency on Scottish climate policy and delivery. That plea remains unanswered. Colin Smith, Labour's Zero spokesman, said, this damning report leaves the SNP Green government's empty rhetoric in tatters. The CCC review, might as well be the CCCP review, noted that the SNP Green Coalition adoption of bold emissions reduction targets, but said they could only be applauded if they were actually achieved, which they cannot be. It's impossible. It found emissions had fallen 59% between 1990 and 2020, meeting an interim target for a 56% drop, but only thanks to substantial contribution from the effects of the pandemic, and it is unlikely that the target would have been met without them. And there is a significant risk that Scotland will fail to meet its annual targets in the 2020s, concluding that what policies and plans are not yet sufficient to speed things up to the required rate. They basically cannot do it. While Miss Sturgeon's government has a laudable aim of cutting car kilometres by 20% by 2030, the assessment said there was no strategy with sufficient levers to deter car use. You cannot deter car use in Scotland because most people don't live anywhere near where they need to be because it's a rural country. The only way they're going to do it, I suppose, is throw the taxes up, but that will only harm the poor. But that's immaterial to the SNP. You know, we'll just force the poor to live in their villages. We'll force the poor to starve, and we'll put the prices up, and the poor will become poorer. Meanwhile, the elites who live in the big central cities don't need to worry about it with their super free transport, or they're rich enough to pay the excess tax on on fuel. It doesn't matter. It's the poor that will pay. But that's Nicola Sturgeon. She hasn't yet banned private jet travel, though, has she? No, that's not going to happen. The CCC said that the targets for replacing gas boilers in homes with low carbon forms of heating, such as heat pumps, imply around double the annual deployment rates that were considered realistic even in our most ambitious scenario. So again, Sturgeon is saying, oh, we're going to change this. We're going to put these heat pumps in. What's the most single ambitious target for that anyone's ever come up with? Oh, it's that rate. Okay, we're going to do it double the most realistic rate. Because bullshit. But that woman must open her mouth and put Andrex across it every day, because that's the amount of shit that comes out of that mouth. Michael Matheson, the SNP's Zero secretary, said, progress has been made. No, it hasn't. Scotland is already more than halfway to net zero. Yeah, that 59% includes the 2 years of COVID lockdown. So, no, it hasn't. You're lying again. But we are now entering the most challenging part of the journey to date. The truth, it's called. With a need to halve our emissions again within the next 8 years. Not going to happen. The Scottish Greens claimed the report was out of date as it was based on a climate strategy drawn up before they joined the SNP in power. But it's still bullshit and they're still signing off on it. But that is only half the problem, of course. The other half, just as a flick, I'm going to cross it here, is if I go here, bang. So the SNP government admits dodgy renewables stat could mean its flagship paper needs rewritten. Now, this is more or less the same story as just given there, but this does include this line that ministers included the now debunked claim that Scotland is home to 25% of Europe's offshore wind power potential. And it isn't. It clearly isn't. And there's that deluded witch who thinks Scotland's got the potential to have 25% of Europe's wind power. Never in a million years. And also, you need to ask them, how are they disposing of those windmills? Nobody asked that question. Nobody asked the question. Windmills like that are not green. The amount of energy it takes to make them, maintain them, and then dispose of them is more than what they're expected to generate in their lifespan. So it's crap, isn't it? But look, the gagging witch there. Honestly, her and her two sisters must sit on the blasted heath looking for bloody Macbeth. Anyway, I'm done with that. I'm going to finish off and come up. So, what's the takeaway? Well, Nicola Sturgeon tells a lot of lies. But hey, we all know that. But she cannot help herself. And these lies on climate change are just another example of the constant outpouring of bullshit that the poor people of Scotland have got to put up with every single day. You can believe nothing because everything she says, every single thing, is a lie. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notification of future output. Leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, keep the heating on, it's really cold out there, and goodbye.